Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. Carrie Alaveld is out. Hopefully, she'll be back next week. As guest host, we have Daily Kos political director David Neer. Thank you, David, for helping out today.
I'm super excited. Let's get rolling.
So, the last 2 weeks, we talked about Ukraine. And if you haven't seen those shows, I would highly recommend it. 2 weeks ago, we talked to some ex-Army officers. Actually, one of them is still in the U.S. Army Reserves, logistical officers, talking about the difficulties Russia has had invading Ukraine. Last week, we talked more geopolitical about the role of fossil fuels in fueling these despotic regimes like Iran and Russia and Venezuela, and how that really skews foreign policy. Today we probably will touch on Ukraine, but we're gonna take a step closer to our usual fare, which is talking about elections, and we're going to be talking about the 2022 midterm elections and specifically the Senate race. David Neer obviously knows about elections. We're going to have as our guest JB Poersch. He is the president of the Senate Majority PAC. That's the Political Action Committee that's affiliated with the Senate Democrats. Was launched under Harry Reid back in the old days. Now is sort of affiliated with Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and their job is to try to get more Democrats elected to the Senate. And so, one of the things we're going to talk about, obviously, is the tough political climate. What are our chances of not just holding the Senate, but expanding it into an actual majority? And we're going to talk about sort of the issues that may impact that. And one of those issues, obviously, is Ukraine, because Russia or Republicans like Ron Johnson have been sort of pretty well attached to Vladimir Putin and Russia, and absolutely Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump just absolutely adores Vlad, wants to be his best friend. And so that's going to have, hopefully that gives Democrats an opportunity. And it's one of the things really want to talk to JB when he comes on, talk to him about that. But before he does so, David, can you help us set the table? What exactly does the Senate look like right now, and what is at stake this November?
Happy to. So, of course, we all know that the Senate is split 50-50 with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking ties. So, goal number one for Democrats and progressives has to be maintaining that majority. And goal number two, or maybe best to call it 1A, is to try to increase that majority to create a mansion-proof and cinema-proof progressive majority that will actually get rid of the filibuster, or at least curtail it. So Democrats.
So, David, so just really quick, I wouldn't even say it's a progressive majority, right? Because there's more sort of moderate Democrats like John Tester and John Warner. I mean, this is not a question of like the liberal wing versus a conservative wing. It's Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kristen Sinema of Arizona, who are they're obstructionists. They're not even interested in working with a caucus to come up with compromises and sort of work through the legislation like a John Tester or John Warner or Mark Kelly, who's been moderate in certain areas. They're happy to work with the caucus. Those two they're trying. What are they trying to do? Do we even know? But it's not a real Democratic majority right now.
Well, that's absolutely right. I would say, though, this is another example of the progressive view becoming the mainstream view over the years, just like we saw, for instance, with same-sex marriage. Daily Kos was advocating for reforming the filibuster more than a decade ago. And now, like you said, even folks like John Tester from conservative Montana support some form of filibuster reform. But you're absolutely right. It's very frustrating and difficult for most Democrats because, of course, there is a nominal Democratic majority. Democrats are in charge. But because of these two obstructionists, the party can't get stuff done. And that creates a very troubling situation where voters want to hold you to account, whether that's fair or not, simply because the D's are in control.
Yeah, I would argue it's fair. I mean, it absolutely is fair. I mean, if you're in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. One of the problems that we have with the filibuster, obviously, is that it allows the minority party to obstruct and then point to the Senate and say, "See that the majority can't get anything done." And people don't understand the filibuster. And there's actually been polling on this. They think it's so irrational that nobody believes it's actually true. But there are places where we don't need the filibuster, and yet we still can't get stuff done. So like it's on the caucus, unfortunately, and it's not fair. I mean, just because it's not fair in the sense that we can explain why it's not working, but people, we shouldn't have to explain complicated Senate maneuverings and the motivations of Kristen Sinema, who nobody understands, to sort of explain that away. And particularly people understand that the traditional levers of leverage in presidential politics don't really apply in a place like West Virginia, where Donald Trump won the state by like 40 points, right? I mean, you're not going to go and threaten.
Exactly.
Joe Biden can't walk in there and threaten anything, because reality is it's a gift to the Democrats that we even have that seat and that we even have a nominal Senate majority. That's sort of the paradox of the situation. Like we should be happy to have Joe Manchin, and yet it's so frustrating that we have Joe Manchin for all the reasons we've talked about. So we have a 50-50 majority, and I'm using air quotes, but it's a nominal majority. So now we're walking into this cycle. Like what's at stake? I mean, we know what's at stake. What's the map look like?
So we all know that 2022 is shaping up to be a difficult midterm. So in terms of where we start with the map, we have to look at the seats where Democrats are on defense. And there are 4 states really that Democrats have to be most concerned about. And the top 2 are Arizona and Georgia. These are both states where Democrats won amazing special election victories in 2020, only for the final 2 years of the terms in both of those states. So Mark Kelly in Arizona, whom you were mentioning just a moment ago, and Raphael Warnock in Georgia, who won that extraordinary runoff just last year, they are both up for re-election. And did you want to sort of go state by state, or do you want to sort of look at the whole battlefield?
Yeah, let's. And one of the things, I mean, obviously, when JB comes on, we'll also dig into the state by states a little closer, right? So I think at this point, let's just keep it broad overview,
Sure.
and then we can really drill down with JB.
So, Kelly and Warnock certainly get most of the attention, but Democrats have another 2 seats that are also going to be really difficult to defend. One is in New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan is up for re-election. She won in 2016. She beat a Republican incumbent by just around 1,000 votes. It's really her race that gave Democrats their current 50-seat majority. That was the closest race of any member of the Democratic caucus right now. And then finally, there's Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto, also first elected in 2016. Again, Nevada is a swingy state, just like New Hampshire. It's one that has kept going Democrats' way by small margins for many years now. The real question is whether they can keep that magic up.
Yeah, we there's been lots of predictions in the Senate of Democrats losing, and even polling showing that the Democrats are in a lot of trouble. And they always seem to sort of eke it out. But by no means does that mean that we're going to continue to eke it out, particularly as we see rural areas sort of solidifying increasingly against Democrats, and turnout margins increasing in those places as well. So it's going to be a tough one for sure.
Absolutely. But the other thing to remember is that, yes, this is shaping up to be a difficult midterm, but Democrats do still have some opportunities to go on offense. There are 2 seats in particular that top the list. I would put Pennsylvania at the very head of the class. That's an open seat. Republican Pat Toomey is retiring. Of course, again, another swing state. Trump won it, then Biden won it by a pretty small margin. Democrats in general, though, have done better than Republicans statewide in Pennsylvania. And Republicans have a nightmare primary there, while Democrats also have a primary, but it's hasn't turned into a total slugfest. And then there's Wisconsin. Any conversation has to include Ron Johnson. We're certainly going to talk about him more later in the show. He's up for re-election. Democrats also have a primary there as well. Probably the most interesting candidate, the one leading in the primary polls, is the Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. He'd be the first Black senator from Wisconsin. And also, I have to mention North Carolina, another open seat. Again, another vile Republican primary. I think we'll probably talk about that one too in the context of Ukraine. And again, Democrats have rallied around a candidate there, former state Supreme Court Chief Justice Sherry Beasley. North Carolina, I'd say, is definitely a little bit tougher than those two seats. Biden won Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. He lost North Carolina narrowly, but those three all represent chances for Democrats to flip GOP seats potentially.
And then Florida.
And then Florida.
Or is Florida Lucy's football?
I mean, doesn't it feel that way, man?
Or the white whale. Let's all the potential analogies.
I mean, yeah, we'll run out of metaphors before long, but Marco Rubio's up for re-election. Obviously, he's one of progressive's top, most despised Republican senators, and Democrats also have united behind a single candidate there. That's Congresswoman Val Demings, and she has raised a ton of money. Certainly, running against Rubio helps. And also remember that in 2016, when Rubio ran for president, he didn't want to run for re-election to the Senate. He had to be goaded into it. So who knows how much he really wants to still be there. But Florida, man, it's gotten redder. And the trends there haven't been good for us.
Yeah, they haven't been good for us. We're also going to have DeSantis running for re-election. So Florida is going to be a bit of a sort of a central focus of this election cycle. And Florida reports early, right? So it always kind of seems to set the tone for the evening. And the last several cycles, we've lost Florida, and it sort of puts its pal on the rest of the night. Even if we do end up doing okay, right? Just losing Florida has that sense of creates a sense of underlying doom, which would be nice if we can reverse it somehow.
That would be nice. I mean, that was true even in 2018, which was an extraordinary Democratic year. But like you said, those returns came in early. We very narrowly lost both the governor's race and Senate race in Florida that year. And then the narrative for the next few days from much of the traditional media was
CNN kept talking about how we lost when we'd actually won 50 seats in the House.
Right. I mean, the Democrats flipped the House, won a whole bunch of governorships. Yeah. So I don't expect Florida to go any differently this year. But, as they say about baseball, this is why they play the games.
Yeah, I've been suggesting to people, and I did this to the Lincoln Project guy, those Republicans that attack Republicans, without any value judgment on them, and I don't value them that well, actually, but I did plant the bug in her ear to say, keep hyping up DeSantis wants to run against Trump, right? Because if you could get Donald Trump to go on an anti-DeSantis tirade, undermining the governor race, that maybe that might depress enough turnout. I mean, there might be some chicanery, some some little rat effing that we can do in the background to pull that one off. Because based on just general trends, that Florida's been a really really tough state. Now the states you've named, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida. That's a 2020 presidential battleground. The only state missing is Michigan, and Michigan doesn't have any Senate seats up this cycle. That is literally the same states that we fought 2020 on.
Yeah, that is. And if we were to reproduce the 2020 results somehow in the Senate, then we would wind up with 52 seats, because the 4 seats that Democrats are defending were all in states that Biden won, even though very, very narrowly. And then you throw in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The problem is that we're facing a typical midterm, so I think that's unlikely. But we're going to fight, and our candidates, we don't have to worry about them having the resources they need. These days, we have really such a strong grassroots fundraising operation throughout the party that no one is going to get left behind.
Yeah. So our guest is here. So let's bring him in, and we're going to be able to dive right into some of these races. Our guest today is JB Poersch. He is the president of Senate Majority PAC. This is the affiliated political action committee with the Senate Democrats, helping Democrats win more Senate seats. JB, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Good to see you, Marcos. Good to see you, David.
So, JB, let me just start really broad picture, right? Historically, the history tells us that the party in power in the White House always loses seats in the first midterm election, right? We all heard this a million times. The data is very clear on that. Other than the post 9/11 Republicans in 92, it holds up pretty well.
Well, there's arguably one more, and it's probably more relevant. It's 2018. Nancy Pelosi wins 40 seats in the House. Meanwhile, in the Senate, we lose 2. Why do we lose 2? Probably in large part because of the map. We're trying to defend in Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota, among other places, and we end up too short, even though we end up winning in, of all places, Montana and West Virginia. But still, we come out -2 at the end of the day, and the map. And I think the map matters here too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I didn't even get a chance to say, what do you think about that? Because you already jumped right into that. But it's a good point. The House, everybody's up for election. But in the Senate, we're only talking about a third of the Senate up. So David and I started looking at that, going over sort of the broad overview of the map. So we don't need to get into what states are going to be battlegrounds. But the overview of that is they're all presidential battlegrounds. Every single one of them was contested in 2020. Maybe New Hampshire, not so much, but everything else was really, there were hard-fought states at the presidential level. How does that tie into this idea that the map might help bail us out in some ways?
Well, I think a couple of things here is that every in that core 7 or 8 states that you keep talking about, and I listened to you and David at the outset here, and you don't really need me because you got a pretty good handle on it. But these states, at those 7, 8 states at the outset, are not just battleground, but where we have incumbents running this time, and as you said, about a third of the Senate caucus is running. Every single incumbent that I have that's running in 2022 is in a state where Joe Biden won. So that's how a battleground begins pretty significantly. And oh, by the way, we won in Pennsylvania. We won in Wisconsin. We lost North Carolina. We being Joe Biden lost North Carolina by 1.3, and Florida you talked about too, by 3.5 points. So that all suggests to you that these should continue to play tight.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
So, JB, one thing that we alluded to at the top of the show, but that we haven't gotten into detail yet, and this is something we'd love to hear from you about. You were quoted in Politico recently on this. We want to talk about all of the nasty GOP primaries that are going on in so many of these states, and how you see them playing out. And progressives, of course, have to be careful what we wish for. A lot of us thought that Donald Trump would be easy to beat in 2016, and of course, he was anything but. So rooting for the most awful candidate doesn't always work out for us. But there definitely seems to be blood getting drawn on multiple sides in some of these states, like North Carolina, Pennsylvania. So what are you seeing that's really of note and of interest?
Just allow me this one lead-in thought, that I think the 3 factors that, despite arguably a challenging political environment, that keeps these Senate races competitive, it gives Democrats the opportunity to keep the Senate majority, is the map that you were just speaking about, and potentially the impact of partisanship, which we can talk more about. Partisanship has been a significant factor in races, arguably since 2016, but 1820, you saw its impact. Sometimes it worked for us, sometimes it didn't. Partisanship still matters here. And then lastly, the quality of the candidates. Yes, candidates still matter. I think Republicans are still struggling. I think the underneath of it that probably deserves more attention in the press is this continuing tension between McConnell and Trump has played itself out into Senate races, and specifically into Senate recruiting. and made it uncomfortable for Republicans, but more to the point, made it harder for them to ascertain candidates the way they normally would. McConnell's had success in the past recruiting candidates, but now he's essentially in a Halloween costume hiding because he doesn't want to get picked out by Trump as recruiting at all. And the one that just screams out starts in Georgia, where McConnell had concerns about a troubled history for Herschel Walker and incidents in his past. And so he had made it clear that they were going to look for another candidate, seemed to be talking to Purdue and maybe to others. And when Trump put his arm around Herschel and said, he's my candidate, all of a sudden, mysteriously, a whole bunch of opposition research popped up on Twitter, and a lot of it was being moved around and forwarded by McConnell's political allies, which was reasonably entertaining because the stuff was gut-wrenching. 3 weeks later, the polling firm in Atlanta, Georgia, Trafalgar, comes out with a poll that says Herschel wins any potential primary by about 31 points. The reporter from Politico goes on the floor and asks Mitch McConnell, now what do you think about Herschel Walker? And he says, I'm warming up to him. The truth was,
that's a white flag.
Warming up to him, he got rolled.
It was a white flag. He surrendered.
Yeah, he did. And you've seen similar tensions in North Carolina, where admittedly it's less clear, but it seems odd that there is a primary between the former governor and a not very impressive backbencher in Ted Budd that Trump announced. Arizona is another fascinating.
Yeah, no, I want to stress that generally speaking, if you're a former elected governor of a state, that you're going to have the red carpet laid out for a Senate race, right? That is you know this. You're in recruiting. There is no better candidate than a former governor, because that person is the only candidate in that state that has won statewide.
Yep. And who's galvanized too. That's not usually true for AGs and lieutenant governors,
Right.
Governors are unique, and usually they serve in a more bipartisan fashion, and usually their support is deeper, and, you look around and you're thinking, you're Mitch McConnell, and you're thinking, look, this environment may be positive for us. I'd really like to expand the map. And if you're going to expand the map, let's make sure we get the governor in New Hampshire. That doesn't work out, probably because of Trump. What about Vermont? That governor was Republican, and he's kind of popular. That doesn't work out. Trump may be a factor there. Maybe the fact that Sununu didn't run in New Hampshire didn't help. What about in Maryland? Hogan gets out. And what about the governor of Arizona and Governor Ducey? Governor Ducey has pulled his name out of the race like 4 different times and will continue to be talked about in the media until the filing deadline in Arizona. But it doesn't look likely he's running. The Trump-McConnell tension can be connected to all these stories to some degree, especially in Arizona, where establishment Republicans wanted Ducey, and not once but twice. Trump's put out press releases saying, A, I'm always going to be against Ducey. B, Mitch McConnell, I know you're behind this.
And just because this is sort of important to stress, the reason that Trump is against Ducey in Arizona and Kemp in Georgia is because they did not steal the 2020 president election for him.
It's part of the narrative. Yep.
I mean, is there something else? Because I haven't.
It's part of the narrative too. And McConnell or Donald Trump has since suggested that Sununu, who's not running for the Senate, but who was likely to run
In New
for
Hampshire.
re-election for governor in New Hampshire, that he may still try and find somebody to run against him, even though he's running for governor for the same reason. So yes, that's a big part of that Trump's motivation.
So historically, JB, how much does primary trouble translates to a general election? I mean, presumably most people they fall in line, right? Just everybody wanted, Elizabeth Warren or whoever, but okay, Joe Biden got it. We're all going to fall in line. How much does primary troubles actually portend general election consequences?
Yeah. It's not the primary trouble, it's the quality of the candidate that results. And if not all trouble results in a bad candidate, but if you're in a competitive state, in a competitive election, and you come up with somebody that's viewed as either more extreme or has holes in the resume, and you go back in time and you think about that primary that resulted back in Indiana with a longtime governor, and then they ended up with a candidate and let Joe Donnelly serve there for 6 years. We could come up with example after example where primaries and extremism lent to bad situations for Republicans.
So what you're saying is like Herschel Walker saying today that there's no evidence for evolution because there are still monkeys in zoos.
Yes.
Might not be the strongest general election candidate. Is that what you're alleging?
He may not be the strongest candidate. It's been said that he's popular. I think it's probably fair to say that he is known, associated with playing Georgia football over 40 years ago. Not as a Georgian, because he's been living in Texas up until 2 months ago. And, Trump and Georgia football are the two things they know about Herschel Walker. Voters in Georgia don't know a whole lot beyond that. Not yet, anyway.
And it's going to be your organization's job to help educate them.
We're a player on the field. Yes, sir.
So a little while ago, we were talking about the former governor in North Carolina, Pat McCrory. He's the notorious SOB who he signed the HB2 anti-trans bill, which led to a national boycott of his state and also cost him his job. But like you were saying, Trump despises him. He's endorsed Ted Budd. McCrory has clung to sort of a modest lead in the polls, but the reason why I wanted to explore him further is last week he came out with an interesting ad. It was the first of its kind that we've seen, where he took Ted Budd to task for praising Vladimir Putin. Budd, in a recent interview, had called Putin very intelligent and suggested that Putin was within his rights to sort of police his neighborhood. The usual kind of appalling sycophancy that many far-right Republicans, including Trump, of course, have shown for Putin. Is this something you see having a real impact in a GOP primary? And is this an issue if Republicans do nominate someone like a Ted Budd? Can you see it playing a role in a general election?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what kind of impact will it have? And will it have the teeth they want in terms of that negative? And obviously, I'm not sure the hit's too new. I'm not sure how it's going to play in the primary. I will say, incidentally, that at the same time, this attack on Budd as being soft on Russia, soft on Putin, the Club for Growth is attacking Ted Budd as being, or I'm sorry, Pat McCrory, the former governor, they're attacking McCrory as being quote unquote liberal, but specifically they run footage of him being on a podcast like this one with Fauci, and at the time McCrory was very praiseworthy of Fauci. The ad goes to some trouble to show how praiseworthy Fauci was. It's pretty tough-ended. And what I want to know, which of these two players, Fauci or Putin in this case, is going to have more impact in the Republican primary. And I guess the safest answer is, I don't know.
I mean, there's even an effort, like in the QAnon circles now, to deify Putin. I mean, this is where they goes the Republican Party. It seems like so we may be a couple months away from support of Putin being a litmus test for Trump Republicans. Trump himself has done nothing to dissuade that, for sure.
There's no arguing the inconsistency in the Republican Party in this given moment about where they are regarding the U.S. relationship with Russia. And there are senators and elected Republican House members that have been probably reasonably defined as sympathetic to the Putin cause. And I think it's more than fair to wonder, when each Republican candidate comes up, where have they been over the course of time, not just as the Ukraine the Ukraine war is heated up, but where they've been over the course of the year, 2 years, 3 years. Normally where they've been is saying anything that Donald Trump might find appealing.
So one of the, I guess, taking a little bit step back from individual races, just since we got into Ukraine and Russia, sort of these overarching issues that are sort of starting to define the race, right? The Republicans are trying to make a big thing out of CRT, critical race theory, cancel culture, masks in school, which, given the attention span of people and the fact that these mask mandates are ending, may not even be relevant in a few months, but right now it's still an issue. And there's Ukraine, obviously. We have the abortion decision. The Supreme Court will likely overturn Roe v. Wade sometime in the summer. These are all sort of macro issues that presumably will impact the campaign. We know that a midterm election is a base turnout election, and I get the sense right now that their side is more motivated than our side is at the moment. How do you see all those issues playing out, and do you have a sense yet on voter intensity, and if we have to worry, if it's where we are at on voter intensity at this time?
Look, it starts again with the history point. David Nurse said at the outset here, talked about traditional primaries, and I think the underlying judgment that he had about it is that normally in off-year elections, Democrats have more to work to do in getting turnout to the level we needed in order to succeed. You don't need the 10 and 14 history lesson, where in both cases turnout was significantly lower.
2010, that was the first, that midterm election after Obama was elected, and Democrats got absolutely pummeled, and we're still suffering consequences from that election. All the maps, all the gerrymandering you see today, that's because we didn't turn out in 2010.
I do think enthusiasm starts at a higher point, a higher level than elections of the past. We still, I think it's fair to say that Republicans are in this moment more motivated, but I don't think the floor is as low as it's been for past elections. I think there's an awful lot of good reasons if you're a Democrat voter, to be motivated or remotivated. I think there are a lot of issues. You can see it in the data, and you and I just know them instinctually that matter to Democrats. Some of it in the positive in terms of the things that have gotten achieved over the last couple of years. And then, yes, there's still fear of Trump. There's still concern and anger over what happened at the Capitol on 1/6. And there's
those hearings are still playing. They're going to be playing out in prime time here in next month. So it's another major.
Yeah, and I think I disagree when people say, well, those issues don't matter and Trump's not on the ballot. And I think to Democrats, they do matter. You know, it can't be the only thing you say to voters when you're trying to motivate them. But to say that it's not on their minds, no. I think it's got to be part of the discourse. I believe that about 1/6, though. I think, to put it in different terms, voters are put off by the fact that Republicans actually refuse to participate in a conference that would have gone deeper on 1/6, and the fact that they weren't willing to take part puts off a lot of voters, not just Democrats but independents as well. And then there's the voter suppression. Look, our Democrats know that as Americans, they were being targeted by Republicans with potential changes in the voting law at the state level, and obviously some of it's not potential. It happened in places like Georgia and Florida and Arizona, and the voters have every right to be angered by that, knowing that they were targeted directly by Republicans and told that they were going to make it harder for them to vote.
So, JB, one thing that I have to ask you about is this plan recently released by Florida Senator Rick Scott, who chairs the NRSC, the official campaign arm of the Senate Republican caucus. This plan was so bonkers in so many ways, but the plank that really stood out the most and got the most attention was Scott's argument that he wants to literally raise taxes on Americans, and not just a handful of Americans. He said he wants every American to pay taxes, by which I presume he means income taxes, because every American does pay sales taxes, etc. He said, yeah, so that everyone has, quote, skin in the game. When I read this, it felt like an unbelievable gift, an unforced error. Do you see Democrats making an issue of this? Do you see it having an impact, or this was just a white paper that no one's ever going to hear about?
And follow up comments by people like Ron Johnson suggests that specifically what Scott said around that tax has merit with a lot of Republicans too. That's their view of fairness, and it's noteworthy that both Scott and Johnson would probably be a little out of touch with their own base, because there are certainly a lot of Republican voters that would fall into the category of not paying into the taxes given their income level right now, and they'd probably be surprised to know that Republicans think they ought to.
But I mean, the dog whistle there is that Black people aren't paying taxes, right? I mean, poor people are not paying taxes, and therefore everybody has to have. I think the word was skin in the game. Everybody should have skin in the game, and so he's talking about raising taxes on 40% of Americans, and without even getting into the details, can Democrats? I mean, we always complain about Democrats can't get the message right, and now you're sort of one of those Democrats that people might point to. Can Democrats get on the same page and basically say they're raising taxes on everybody, just about everybody?
Yeah,
because it's such a clean, simple message. It undermines their entire reason to exist. I mean, they already gave up on Russia. They gave up on family values. Are they now giving up on taxes and taking away the last plank of the traditional Republican Party that once propped them up? I mean,
it's an opportunity to take advantage of.
Do you see it showing up in ads?
I think that right now what we got to do is drive this and get continue to hold Republicans accountable. The idea that it would show up on an ad, certainly.
What other issues are you seeing on the macro level? Yeah, so you guys will be running ads. You'll be doing digital and TV and all that good stuff. I mean, what issues? I mean, obviously we have to let the primaries play out, and that's going to inform a lot of the message in specific races. But from a more macro national standpoint, what are the themes that you guys see early on maybe driving this election? Because we know there's our critical race theory, cancel culture, and
the border,
and trans athletes in women's sports, and the border, right? I mean,
right. And look, on the Democratic side, It's likely abortion's going to be part of this conversation in 2022. It's likely that it won't surprise anybody if the court takes action before the election, and it's likely to make this a more salient issue. We don't know that for sure. I would add to it that I think voters across the board do have concerns about rising costs around inflation.
Inflation is going to be a big part of their attacks.
It's easier for Republicans to simply say, "Oh, this is all Joe Biden's fault." I think voters are a little smarter about it. I think voters realize it comes out of the pandemic, even before what's happened in Ukraine as far as rising gas costs. They see price gouging. They see corporations trying to make up for lost profits, all being part of the deal here. And even before you get to a partisan, oh, it's Trump's fault, it's Biden's fault. And then when you get to solutions, the Republicans really aren't saying anything.
Rick Scott is, and Mitch McConnell ran away screaming in the other direction.
We're not going to talk about it. We're only going to say that it's the Democrats' fault, and I hope that's enough. And if several Republicans have already said, including Kevin McCarthy this week, Putin didn't create this, Biden did. Okay. But as far as solutions, let's talk about that too. Let's talk about trying to cut costs for drugs. Let's talk about cutting costs for insulin. Let's talk about whether there would be a tax cut freeze to the gas tax for a year. Those are all legitimate issues. I think you're going to find Democrats talking about it. I think it'll be significant when Republicans trying to avoid any position on it at all, and will likely oppose a whole host of these.
So, you got something, David?
No, you go ahead, Marcos.
Yeah, so just to drill, so obviously Democrats are going to have to deal with the inflation question, and hopefully they go on the offensive with that. I mean, there's a story to be told there that if they're playing defense, gas taxes, the gas prices are going to be an issue. So that there are some concerns that sort of compound the traditional midterm problem that a party in power has. On the other side, you have Donald Trump that's refusing to get out of the limelight. So instead of making this a referendum just on Joe Biden, Donald Trump is sticking his dumb ass into the picture. And now, if we can make it a referendum between Biden and Trump, that I think gives us some leverage. One of the issues that really resonates with the party base, and Biden, for whatever reason, hasn't acted on it, is college debt relief. Is there anything you see on that front that Democrats can do or run on or pressure? Because that may actually depress. That has a opportunity to motivate people that right now seem to be depressed because they were promised debt relief and it hasn't happened.
Look, I think Senate candidates will be talking about it, and it's very much on the minds of voters. Leader Schumer is a major proponent in the party to seeing good portions of the debt relieved, off the backs of families who are struggling with it. So regardless of how this gets addressed going forward in this Congress, I just think it's going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah. So we're getting close to the end of the segment. So I want to get back down to the races. And I'm going to ask you, and this may be an unfair exercise, but I'm going to ask you anyway, can you rank the races in terms of opportunity for pickups?
Well, look, starting with that map of those 6, 7, 8 states that get talked about, we already made mention of the incumbents that get talked about. I think Democrats have a legitimate shot in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania will probably start even, maybe a little bit of advantage for Democrats. Johnson, as you know, his numbers are arguably as bad
in Wisconsin
as they ever were. And in Wisconsin. I don't sleep on Sherry Beasley in North Carolina. We've talked a lot about her potential opponents, but the former Chief Justice in North Carolina is a quality candidate and deserves her day. And, that other presidential state you mentioned, Val Deming's fundraising's been terrific. Yes, Florida's hard. I don't talk to a Democrat that doesn't say that. It's hard, but it was just 4 years ago, Democrats lost the Senate race by 10,000 votes out of 4.2 million cast.
Yeah.
And at the Senate level, we lost the governor's race by 32,000 votes. So I'm not sure we should just give that state away.
And what about any expand the map opportunities in places like Ohio, Iowa, and obviously these have been trending away from us in recent years. So it gets tougher and tougher, it seems, cycle by cycle. But we seem to have a good candidate in Ohio, at least.
Donors and activists in the Democratic Party never let me forget places like Ohio and Missouri, especially if you're a Democrat, how can you not be annoyed by the candidates that are running in both
God awful.
the Republican candidates in Missouri and Ohio that have moved not just to the right, but away from the norm, and so
they're like QAnon level candidates that may be in the Senate.
Yeah, we're talking about potential fringe candidates, and the Trump Derby has played out in these states where Republicans are so eager to do just about anything they are to kiss the ring. And that's part of the drama, too, in both Ohio and Missouri. So I think those states are going to get a lot of attention. Yes, they're challenging states. There's no doubt about it. I think you'll see a candidate develop in Missouri. I think that if assuming that Ryan wins his Democratic primary, he's going to be an awfully good candidate as well.
And JB, are there any seats to play the sort of Jiminy Cricket here on the Democratic side, not in that sort of top four we mentioned, Georgia, Arizona, New Hampshire, Nevada, that we might need to be worried about?
Well, Republicans are going to make it about, they're obviously focused on incumbents in Nevada, in Arizona, in Georgia, probably those three. We'll see if they bring it after they lost arguably quality candidates. We'll see how important New Hampshire is to them in the future. And we'll see where they can take it from there. I'm not going to do their work for them, I guess.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer.
Let them do that.
So, JB, we are out of time. So is there anything people can do to help you do your job better and help Democrats win in the Senate? So here's a chance to pitch whatever you're working on.
Yeah, I would say, get involved too. There's no question that keeping in the Senate means so much in terms of the judges, in terms of Joe Biden's cabinet and around him, as well as the course. I think Republicans are already, if they're not in touchdown dance stance already, they certainly have the mindset that things are going their way, and they're pretty cocky about it. You need Democrats to stay involved here, because just like the last cycle, we're playing for big, huge stakes, and we need your help, folks. So come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah, democracy. We always say this, the democracy is on the line, but it's true, because it is.
I know it feels hard, but it also feels more true with every passing cycle.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
JB Poersch, he is the president of Senate Majority PAC.
Good seeing you, Marcus. Thank you,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. And David, it really is about democracy, right? Because if we were to win a actual majority, a 52 Senate, 52 seat majority, then you could talk about things like DC statehood and expanding the Supreme Court and true voter rights and maybe banning partisan gerrymandering. I mean, these are all things that can actually happen. We just need 2 more seats to do so. I know, David, you've been tracking these races. It's from my vantage point, and I haven't been as deep into the weeds as you have, but all these candidates seem to be running on eliminating the filibuster, right?
That's 100% true. And it's been an interesting phenomenon to watch over the years. It would be really difficult to find a Democrat who says they don't support at least some form of filibuster reform. Many these days say they want to eliminate it outright. And, Marcos, I remember way back in the 2000s, Daily Kos used to put a short questionnaire to Senate candidates that we wanted to endorse. And one of our questions was, do you support eliminating the filibuster? And people were very squirrely about that back then, and it certainly was not a topic.
Controversial.
Yeah, it was not a widespread topic of conversation. We were often accused of naivete. What if Democrats are in the minority?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how views on that have completely changed. And I sort of think of it like Barack Obama, his views changed over time with regard to same-sex marriage. He was the last Democrat who would ever be elected president who opposed same-sex marriage. And of course, while he was in office, he changed his standpoint. I think it would be almost impossible going forward at this point for a Democrat to win a primary in a competitive Senate race who doesn't support filibuster reform.
Yeah, no, we were, it was funny. Like, what if the Democrats lose? It's like, yeah, it's called democracy. I mean, elections have consequences, and they should, whether we win or lose. Yeah.
I agree with that quite strongly. And in particular, we were talking a lot with JB about, how there's so often this backlash during midterm elections. And, political scientists have studied this a lot. And there's many competing arguments about why it happens. But one argument that really resonated with me is that our system is set up for so much gridlock that a party wins an election and they don't even have a chance to enact the agenda that they promised voters. And with this constant frustration, that kind of leads to these big swings back and forth in these midterm years. And so, yeah, I feel it's healthier for democracy if a party can win and actually have a chance at doing what it promised it would do.
Yeah, and a lot of that cynicism about politicians never deliver on what they promise. It's because the system's built in a way that actually literally prevents them from delivering on what they promise. So, David, we've been talking a lot about elections, and this is sort of your core work. And in fact, you just launched a podcast to dig more into this topic. So, tell us a little bit about it, what it's called, and what the focus is. What are you trying to accomplish with your podcast?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been super exciting. So the new podcast is called The Down-ballot, and
Awesome.
that should give a very clear sense of what its focus is, which is the same stuff we've been writing about at Daily Kos elections for many, many years now. All the elections below the level of the presidency. The presidential election, of course, it's the most important one that there ever is every 4 years. But all of these other races are hugely, hugely important. We've been talking about the importance of the Senate, but it goes to the House and state legislatures. Marcos, you were talking about how we've gotten screwed in gerrymandering because we've lost so many state legislative elections, and this has been our bread and butter for almost 20 years now. And now we're talking about it once a week. You can find the Down-ballot on every major podcast platform. Just plug in the name of the show. It's co-hosted by myself and David Beard, who is one of our contributing editors at Daily Kos.
Call it David and David, the David and David show.
Well, so I just want to be clear. I'm David Neer, and he's David Beard. The same first name, very similar sounding last names. Leads to no end of confusion, but we are not at all confused about our subject matter. So every week we generally have on a guest. Marcos, of course, you were our first guest. We did a great rundown memory lane of how Daily Kos and Daily Kos elections came to be. But we've also had other folks on to talk about online polling. We had Drew Linzer. We recently had Amanda Littman, who runs the progressive organization Run for Something, that helps young, diverse progressive candidates run for offices at all levels of the ballot, all the way down to school board. And so we get a chance to sort of do a deep dive and have a little more back and forth in a different format than we do online. And it's about 30 to 45 minutes each week, and it's a fun listen.
Yeah, there's a reason that Democrats have won the popular vote, in 7 of the last 8 elections, yet we didn't hold the presidency for 7 of the 8 elections, and we don't have the Supreme Court. We have a 6-3 deficit in the Supreme Court. Democrats did pretty good on gerrymandering, but it was a defensive action. We weren't on offense. We were trying to limit the damage Republicans already did in 2010, and I think from all indications we fought them to a stalemate this year, which just means that they have a huge advantage. What is it? A 5, 6, 7 point advantage in if you were to aggregate the popular vote for House races, we would have to win by like 7 points to win control of the House, to retain control of the House. I mean, it's rough. And why? Because they focus on down ballot. That's the focus. For so many years, Democrats have been really obsessed with the presidency, right? And you saw this play out in for example, the battle, the Bernie versus Hillary wars of a few years ago. Everybody obsessed with the White House, White House, White House. Everything else is atrophied below us. Republicans don't do that, right? So this is why I love what Daily Kos has done for you. You say a few years, David. It's been 20 years now. It's what Daily Kos has done for 20 years. Oh, it's a whole generation. We're a generation of work, 20 years. But also what you're focusing on in your podcast this is the place where the vast majority of the work is done in upholding our democracy. And you can have the White House all you want, but if Joe Biden's president and Mitch McConnell runs the Senate and Kevin McCarthy or Donald Trump runs the House, because now a lot of the Republicans say that they're going to elect Donald Trump as the Speaker of the House. You don't have to be a member of the House to be Speaker of the House. That's a fun fact. So now they're saying maybe Donald Trump can be Speaker of the House. How much is Joe Biden going to be able to accomplish, right? At very best, maybe some judges, right? But no, not even, because they'll block all the judges. No, nothing. Some administrative actions that the courts will throw out because the courts are controlled by Republicans. I mean, things are pretty bleak, and it's because we haven't focused on building the down ballot focus. And I know when Carrie comes back, she loves to talk about organizing in rural areas to minimize the damage we're suffering in rural areas. We also talk about maximizing turnout amongst core Democratic constituencies like young people, which is why college debt relief is so important. But and David, like in recent years, donors, progressive donors are actually starting to fund those campaigns a lot more, right? So we are seeing progress. I don't want to sound like it's all shit, because 20 years ago it was shit, not now.
That's exactly the point that I was going to jump in to make. By the way, it is in fact Daily Kos's 20th anniversary in May. I hope we have a big celebration plan for that. But yeah, what we saw, particularly at the start of the Trump era, I think, was for people like you and me who have been devoting our lives to down ballot elections, we finally saw a much wider group of people interested. And I think the key reason was everyone knew that you had to wait 4 years to get Donald Trump. But the 2018 midterms, those were only 2 years off. And all of a sudden, we just saw unbelievable levels of interest. And I mean, we saw this explosion in grassroots donations. Things are just so different in campaign finance than they ever used to be.
Didn't even wait that long, because 2017 was the special election with John Ossoff.
Right. And
for the record, David Neer and his team were the first people to spot that opportunity in the entire political world, and people thought we were crazy. And then a lot of Beltway folks mocked us after John Ossoff lost, and we said, you got this all wrong. You're only looking at wins and losses. You're not looking at the margins here. And he got the margin very, very close. And then, of course, we flipped that seat. Lucy McBath flipped that seat the next year. And now we call John Ossoff, we refer to him as Senator. So, I think it really vindicated our point of view. But, we do have to be very clear-eyed. We've always prided ourselves on being a reality-based community at Daily Kos.
we have to be clear-eyed about what the stakes are in 2022. And just because things are going to be tough and things probably are not going to really turn out the way we want, we can't just go home. That we have to redouble our efforts, win or lose.
And we're building towards, because you never know what's going to happen in politics. We don't know how Roe v. Wade being thrown out by the courts is going to galvanize voters. We don't know how Ukraine and Russia and Donald Trump are going to impact the race. This is not a normal midterm election. I mean, this is like going back to 1992 after 9/11, and Republicans going like,
2002, buddy.
2000. Yeah, sorry. 20 years ago is a long time. So it was, it's thinking about, oh my God, 20 years is in the 2000s. We are really getting old, aren't we?
I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay. That hurt a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It hurt a little bit. But yeah, you fight because you don't know what the climate's going to look like. And I got to say, there's years, I know 2010, we were looking at that. We saw that tsunami coming early and we're like, ugh, this is going to be the worst. I'm not seeing that this time.
It feels different.
I'm seeing a tough cycle, but I'm seeing a winnable if everything goes right. But you know what? Donald Trump won because everything went right for him.
Yep.
It happens in politics. It happens.
No, I agree. I felt that 2010 we were doomed well in advance. And I think that there was one point that JB made that I thought was a really incredibly important one. As bad as the 2018 midterms were for the GOP, they won Senate seats. They picked up Senate seats. So, you have to put that on the short list of midterms where things did not go according to historical tradition. So, we're going to fight because you never know. You cannot just assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, David, for stepping in. Congratulations on a new podcast. I encourage everybody to catch David at Daily Kos, but also, and David, your Twitter handle is David Near, right?
That's right.
N-I-R. Also, his new podcast, The Down-ballot, everywhere you might get your podcasts. So excited about that. Congratulations on that. Thanks to JB Poersch for joining us and talking about the Senate map. Thanks to Walter for producing, and the rest of the brief team, Dorothy and Kara. And thank you, the viewer and the reader, for catching the show, for visiting with us this last hour, and for being fellow travelers in this battle for our democracy. I wouldn't wish to be with anybody else at my side as we try to rescue our democracy this November. Thank you, sir, very much. Catch you next week.